Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're unlocking one of the absolute most enigmatic images ever put to paper. We are looking at Plate 7 of the Mutus Liber. Now, if you've been following our journey through historical alchemy, you already know that the Mutus Liber, or the Mute Book, relies entirely on imagery to convey its deepest secrets. It's basically a picture book designed for brilliant minds. And the plate we're unpacking today? It acts as this fascinating, highly intricate map of ultimate transformation. It's not just a static picture, it's a dynamic, living process frozen in time.
But this begs a pretty wild question, right? How exactly does a 17th century drawing manage to explain both the gritty, hands-on reality of physical chemistry and the modern complexities of human psychology? Well, what might at first glance just look like some archaic illustration filled with angels and old gods is actually a rigorous blueprint for growth. It's a coded manual for profound change, mapping out a process that applies just as much to the human mind as it does to matter in a flask. Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to follow a clear four-step roadmap today. First, decoding Plate 7. Second, the chemistry of cohobation. Third, Saturn and the shadow. And finally, the wheel of transformation.
All right, kicking things off with Step 1, decoding Plate 7. Context is literally everything here. Following the sealing of the philosophical egg, that glass vessel we saw back in the previous plate, this specific image acts as our ultimate cheat sheet. It takes that contained, sealed energy and ramps it up to an entirely new level of intensity. The whole thing is deliberately divided into three distinct visual registers, or layers. The upper register shows four angels symbolizing the four operations. The middle register features the alchemical pair actively performing a process called cohobation. And the lower register holds this dark, brooding figure of Saturn, representing dissolution. Keeping this three-part structure in the back of your mind is absolutely key to unlocking the rest of the page. So let's take a closer look at that top layer. The upper register gives us four distinct panels, showing these winged angelic figures, and each one is carefully holding a flask, what alchemists would call a mattress. This brilliantly illustrates the crucial role of the number 4 in the alchemical tradition. It's definitely not a random number. It represents the four elements: fire, air, water, and earth. It perfectly mirrors the four seasons of nature. And specifically for the person working in the laboratory, it maps out the four stages of the alchemical vessel's heating cycle. You can actually see the gradual alteration of the matter inside those flasks as the vapor continuously rises and falls.
But here's the catch. This complex imagery we just mapped out, it isn't the final destination. Instead, it illustrates the completion of the prima operatio, the first major foundational phase of the great work. See, in classical alchemy, true purification is never achieved in a single easy step. It requires these intense, repetitive cycles just to lay the groundwork, and that's exactly what this stage completes.
Which brings us to Part 2, the chemistry of cohabitation.
If we zoom out a bit from the pure visuals and look at early modern physical laboratory alchemy, our attention goes straight to that middle register. We've got the adept and his partner, the Sora Mystica, hard at work. They are performing a very specific chemical process known as cohabitation. Essentially, cohabitation is this continuous loop of dissolving, distilling, and then physically pouring that distilled volatile spirit right back onto its own dry, fixed residue, often called the caput or the salt. It's a highly active, totally hands-on cycle designed to slowly soften, dissolve, and eventually spiritualize all that heavy, dry earth sitting at the bottom of the flask.
The actual mechanics of this rely heavily on rhythmic heating. It's a deliberate three-step dance. First up, vaporization. The heated matter turns to spirit and rises. Second is condensation, where it cools and falls back down. And third is the physical repouring, or the cohobation itself. This constant rising and falling creates a completely self-sustaining atmospheric loop inside that sealed glass egg. They are literally engineering a microclimate of transformation in a bottle.
And get this, early modern chemists weren't just doing this one time and calling it a day. No way! They would repeat this exact distillation cycle anywhere from 7 to 12 times. Each and every iteration dramatically bumps up the concentration of the active volatile salts. It is all about building potency through deliberate, stubborn repetition. You simply don't get purity on the first try. You have to sweat for it through continuous cycles.
Let's shift gears a bit for Step 3, Saturn and the shadow.
Let's see how this all builds when we apply Carl Jung's psychological framework to this exact same process. In physical alchemy, you're redistilling a liquid over a solid residue. But in Jungian psychological alchemy, cohobation represents something far more personal. It's the necessity of revisiting our own deep-seated emotional patterns, or even personal trauma, from a slightly higher level of consciousness each time. Psychological growth is never a straight, easy line, right? It's a spiral. We have to repeatedly subject our own insights to critical scrutiny just to make sure our newly developing self isn't completely fragile. We got to do the inner work, over and over again.
And that brings us down to the bottom layer, featuring the incredibly imposing, brooding figure of Saturn, also known as Kronos, holding his scythe. In the alchemical world, Saturn represents lead, the concept of time, and most importantly, the nigredo stage. Nigredo literally translates to blackness. It is this daunting, intense phase of darkness and decay where chemical bonds have to completely break down. In a physical lab, this phase actually emits a super pungent odor, which tells the alchemist the matter is undergoing total putrefaction. Basically, things have to get extremely messy before they can ever get clean.
The visual they use here is brutal, for a very good reason. Saturn is literally devouring his own child. Psychologically speaking, this symbolizes a challenging but absolutely necessary confrontation with the Jungian shadow. The ego has to willingly allow its old, rigid identity constructs to be devoured and dissolved by deep psychological reflection. Just like the original physical substance in the flask has to completely die in Saturn's dark waters before it can be resurrected as the glorious gold or red king, we have to face our own metaphorical mortality. We literally have to let our old selves die to grow into who we're meant to be.
Finally, let's look at step 4, the wheel of transformation. Zooming out one last time to the grand Hermetic philosophy that seamlessly governs all of physical chemistry and psychological growth we've been talking about, just listen to the mysterious rigor of this ancient maxim. Rotate the wheel, transform earth into water, water into air, air into fire, and fire into earth. Ultimately, Plate 7 is a flawless visual map of this exact elemental transformation. It's what the master alchemists referred to as the rota artis, or the wheel of nature. It's a fundamental law of the universe laid bare, showing us how absolutely everything must cycle through the elements to evolve.
And this perfectly illustrates the ultimate law of rebirth. The sources are super clear on this. Spirit cannot permanently unite with matter until that matter has been thoroughly spiritualized through the process of death and rebirth. Saturn, that dark figure at the very bottom, is the gateway through which all earthly forms have to pass. True spiritual unity, whether you're trying to achieve it in a glass flask on a hot furnace or deep within the human mind, requires plunging through those dark waters of dissolution first. You have to break down the old to build the new, over and over, spiraling your way upward toward perfection.
So, as we wrap up this explainer on the incredible depths of Plate 7, I want to turn this powerful, centuries-old metaphor directly over to you. Think about that repeating cycle of cohabitation in your own life. Think about Saturn devouring the old to make way for the new. What old identity constructs, what outdated versions of yourself do you need to willingly let dissolve in order to achieve your own psychological gold? It is a tough, dark question for sure. But as the alchemists knew all too well, staring right into that darkness is the only way to truly transform. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey into the Mutus Liber. Keep questioning, keep turning the wheel, and I will see you in the next explainer.